I walked into the ballroom with Veronica, my mistress, on my arm, feeling like I'd finally made it. I was thinking my wife was at home cutting veggies or cleaning the house. Then I heard the presenter calling the audience attention. The CEO was about to give the opening speech, and I can't wait to see him in person. David Anthony adjusted his tie as he approached the registration desk at the Grand Meridian Hotel, Veronica Martinez clinging to his arm in a red dress that had cost him 3 months of secret credit card payments. The ballroom glittered with Chicago's business elite, executives in tailored suits, women in designer gowns, champagne flowing like water. This was where he belonged. Not in that cramped apartment with his wife Liza, eating her budget casseroles and listening to her talk about saving money. Name? The registration attendant asked with a professional smile. David Anthony, marketing department at Hartwell Industries. +1. The woman scanned her tablet. Got you. Here are your badges. She handed them over, her eyes flicking to Veronica with barely concealed appreciation. The CEO's keynote address starts at 8. Enjoy the evening. David clipped on his badge and handed Veronica hers, feeling a surge of satisfaction. 6 months ago, he never would have had the courage to bring his girlfriend to a company event. 6 months ago, he'd still been pretending his marriage to Liza meant something. But David had changed. He'd realized that Liza, sweet, frugal, unsophisticated Liza, was holding him back. She worked at a call center, for God's sake. Came home in her clearance rack, clothes smelling like cheap coffee and recycled air. She didn't understand the corporate world, didn't care about networking or appearances or climbing the ladder. Veronica understood. Veronica was a legal secretary at a downtown firm, knew how to dress, how to talk to important people, how to be the kind of woman a successful man should have on his arm. This place is incredible, Veronica whispered, her eyes wide as they entered the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings. A string quartet played near the stage. Servers circulated with hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more than Liza's weekly grocery budget. Wait until you meet some of the VPs, David said, spotting his supervisor across the room. Come on, I'll introduce you. What David didn't know, what he couldn't know because he'd stopped paying attention to his wife months ago, was that Liza Anthony wasn't at home clipping coupons. She was upstairs in the VIP suite, reviewing her keynote speech. Because Liza Anthony wasn't just any employee at a call center. She was the CEO of Tech Vision Solutions, the company that had just acquired Hartwell Industries 3 weeks ago. The problems in David and Liza's marriage hadn't started suddenly. They'd crept in slowly, like water finding cracks in a foundation. David had married Liza Rodriguez 2 years ago for love. Real, genuine love that made him feel like the luckiest man alive. She was a black, brilliant woman. A software engineer with a mind that could solve problems in minutes that would take him days. She was kind, bringing him coffee during late study nights, listening to his dreams about climbing the corporate ladder, supporting every ambition he had. On their wedding night, in the cheap hotel room that was all they could afford, he'd promised her the world. I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to build us an amazing life. We'll build it together, Liza had said, kissing him. That's what partnership means. And for over 1 year, they had. David worked in marketing for a mid-sized firm. Liza freelanced as a software contractor. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood, cooked dinner together most nights, talked about their days, made plans for the future. They were happy until David got promoted. The promotion came with a transfer to Hartwell's downtown headquarters. Suddenly, he was surrounded by wealth. Colleagues who drove luxury cars, wore designer suits, talked about vacation homes and country clubs. His new office had views of the lake. His new colleagues had connections and pedigrees and the kind of casual confidence that comes from never worrying about money. And David started noticing things about Liza he'd never minded before. The way she bought generic brands at the grocery store, comparing unit prices like it was a competitive sport. The way she wore the same rotation of 3 work outfits, all from Target or clearance racks. The way she got excited about finding a good sale, like saving $5 on laundry detergent was some kind of victory. It started to embarrass him. "We should invest in some nicer clothes," he'd suggested one evening after a particularly painful company dinner where a senior director's wife had looked at Liza's dress with barely concealed pity. "Why? The clothes I have work fine," Liza had said, not looking up from her laptop. She was always on that laptop lately, working on side projects she never talked about in detail. "It's about making an impression, Liza. In the corporate world, appearance matters. You know that. Good thing I don't work in the corporate world then." She'd smiled at him, that gentle smile that used to make his heart race, but now just irritated him. "I'm happy with what we have, David. We're saving for a house, remember? That's more important than expensive clothes nobody's going to notice anyway." But people did notice. David noticed his colleagues' wives in their Nordstrom dresses and Kate's Spade bags. Noticed the way they talked about their yoga instructors and their weekend spa trips. Noticed the way they looked at Liza like she was a curiosity from another world. The final straw came at the company holiday party last year. Liza had worn a black dress from an outlet mall. Perfectly fine, perfectly appropriate. But standing next to the other executives' wives in their designer gowns, she'd looked plain, ordinary. And when Thomas Bradley's wife had asked what Liza did for a living and Liza had said, "I work in tech support," David had wanted to sink through the floor. Tech support. Like she worked at a call center helping people reset their passwords. Then he met Veronica Martinez 2 months later at a marketing industry mixer. She was a legal secretary at Preston and Walsh downtown, but she carried herself like a partner. Designer dress that hugged her curves, expensive perfume, the kind of polished beauty that turned heads when she walked into a room. When she'd flirted with him, David had felt a thrill he hadn't felt in months. Here was a woman who understood the game, who knew that success was as much about perception as performance, who looked the part. The affair had started innocently enough. Coffee to discuss potential business synergies between their companies. Then lunches at upscale restaurants where David found himself paying more for one meal than Liza spent on groceries for a week. Then dinners that stretched late. Then a hotel room that David paid for with a credit card Liza didn't know about. And through it all, Liza never suspected. She was always too busy with her laptop, her mysterious phone calls, her freelance projects that seemed to consume all her time and attention. David convinced himself he was the victim in this scenario, that Liza had given up on their marriage by choosing her work over him, her frugality over enjoyment, her simple life over his ambitions. He never considered that he was the one who'd changed, that Liza was exactly the same person he'd married. The same brilliant, kind, hardworking woman who'd supported his dreams even when they had nothing. He'd just decided she wasn't enough anymore. "David, good to see you." Thomas Bradley, the VP of marketing, approached with a broad smile and a tumbler of whiskey. His eyes slid to Veronica. "And who's this lovely lady?" "This is Veronica Martinez," David said smoothly. "She's an attorney downtown." "Veronica, this is Thomas Bradley, my VP." They shook hands, Veronica deploying her most charming smile. David felt a rush of satisfaction. This was right. This was how things should be. "Big night tonight," Thomas said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "First official event since the acquisition. New CEO's supposed to be a real hard ass about performance metrics. Word is she's planning to clean house in underperforming departments." David's stomach tightened. "She?" "Yeah, TechVision CEO. Built the company from nothing, apparently. Worth billions now." Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "Anyway, enjoy the evening. Speech starts in 20 minutes." They circulated through the crowd, David collecting business cards and making small talk. Veronica played her part perfectly, laughing at jokes, asking intelligent questions, being precisely the kind of companion that signaled success. At 7:55, the lights dimmed. A voice over the sound system asked everyone to take their seats. David and Veronica found seats near the front. The room settled into anticipatory silence. A spotlight hit the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice rang out. "Please welcome the founder and CEO of Tech Vision Solutions, Liza Anthony." David's blood turned to ice. The woman who walked onto the stage was his wife, but she looked nothing like the Liza he'd left at home that morning. Her hair, usually pulled into a simple ponytail, was styled in an elegant updo. She wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than his car. Diamond earrings caught the light, real diamonds, not the cubic zirconia from their wedding. But it was her presence that truly shocked him. The shy, quiet woman who apologized for taking up space had been replaced by someone who commanded the room with effortless authority. Liza Anthony, his wife, the call center worker, the coupon clipper, stood at the podium and smiled at the assembled executives like she owned them. Because she did. "Good evening," Liza's voice carried across the ballroom, confident and clear. 3 weeks ago, Tech Vision Solutions acquired Hartwell Industries for $1.2 billion. Many of you are wondering what this means for your futures. David couldn't breathe. Veronica's hand on his arm felt like a brand. "I built Tech Vision from nothing," Liza continued. 10 years ago, I was writing code in a studio apartment, living on ramen, pitching to investors who told me a woman, especially a black woman, would never succeed in tech. They were wrong. Tech Vision is now valued at $3.2 billion. The audience was rapt. David felt like he was drowning. "I didn't acquire Hartwell to gut it. I acquired it because I see potential. But I will not tolerate mediocrity. Over the next 3 months, I'll be reviewing every department, every team, every individual. Those who demonstrate value, integrity, and commitment to excellence will thrive. Those who don't won't." David didn't hear the rest of the speech. His mind was spinning. The call center job, the side projects, the mysterious phone calls. It had all been real, just not what he'd thought. When the speech ended, the crowd erupted in applause. Liza stepped off the stage, immediately surrounded by senior executives. "She's impressive," Veronica murmured. "If you could get on her radar, David, this could be huge for your career." David's laugh came out strangled. Before he could respond, a senior executive approached. "David Anthony, the CEO wants to see you in the VIP suite." Now, Veronica's eyes went wide. "Oh my God, David. This is perfect." David felt like he was going to throw up. "I'll wait at the bar," Veronica said. "Go. Make a good impression." The executive led David through the crowd, up a service elevator, down a quiet hallway lined with abstract art worth more than David's annual salary. He knocked on a door marked VIP Suite and opened it without waiting for a response. "Mr. Anthony," as requested, he said, then left, closing the door behind David. The suite was elegant, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline, leather furniture, a bar cart with top-shelf liquor. Liza stood by the window, her back to him, silhouetted against the city lights. She'd removed her suit jacket. Her shoulders were tense. "Sit down, David." Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes before a storm. David sat in one of the leather chairs, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His mouth was dry. His hands were shaking. Liza turned to face him. Up close, he could see the subtle makeup that enhanced rather than masked her features, the professional styling that brought out the natural beauty he'd stopped noticing months ago. But it was her eyes that struck him. Dark and hard, and completely devoid of the warmth he'd taken for granted for 3 years. How long have you been sleeping with her? Liza asked. No preamble. No pretense. Just the question, sharp as a scalpel. David's mouth opened. Closed. His brain scrambled for an excuse, a lie, anything. Liza, how long? Each word was precisely enunciated. 6 months. The admission came out as a whisper. Liza nodded slowly, like she'd expected exactly that answer. Like she'd known all along and had just been waiting for him to confirm it. And tonight, bringing her here? To a company event where spouses were explicitly invited? Where my name was literally on the invitation as the keynote speaker? David felt the blood drain from his face. Your name was on the invitation. Liza Anthony, CEO of Tech Vision Solutions. But you didn't read it, did you? You just saw corporate gala and thought it was a chance to show off your secretary girlfriend to your colleagues. Veronica's not a secretary, she's. I don't care what she is. Liza's voice cut like ice. I care that you brought your mistress to an event where I was scheduled to speak, where everyone in your company would see you with another woman, where you were prepared to humiliate me, except you didn't think I'd be there. You thought your call center wife would be at home in her thrift store clothes, completely unaware that her husband was parading around with someone he thought was better. David couldn't speak, couldn't defend himself, because she was right about all of it. I've known about Veronica for 4 months, Liza said quietly, walking to the bar cart and pouring herself 2 fingers of whiskey. She didn't offer him any. I hired a private investigator after you came home smelling like her perfume for the 3rd time and didn't even bother to shower before getting into bed with me. For months, David's voice cracked. But you never said anything. You never confronted you. Liza took a sip of whiskey, her eyes never leaving his. No, I had more important things to do. I was in the middle of acquiring your company, David. I was negotiating with Hartwell's board, conducting due diligence, preparing SEC filings. I was running a $3 billion company while you were sneaking off to hotel rooms with a woman whose ambition peaked at marrying someone with a corner office. She set down her glass. I was also consulting with one of the best divorce attorneys in Chicago, making sure that when I ended this marriage, you'd get exactly what you deserve, which is nothing. Divorced? The word felt like a physical blow. Liza, wait, we can talk about this. We can work through. Work through what, David? The fact that you've been cheating on me for half a year? The fact that you were so ashamed of me that you told people I worked at a call center when I was running board meetings? The fact that you looked at me every day and saw a failure when I was building an empire? Her voice was rising now, the calm facade cracking to reveal the fury underneath. I supported you through business school, David. I worked 3 freelance jobs so you could quit that terrible retail position and focus on your MBA. I believed in you when no one else did. I loved you when you had nothing. I know, and I'm so sorry. Don't. Liza held up her hand. Don't you dare apologize like that makes any difference. You want to know what the worst part is? It's not even the cheating. It's that you never asked. Never once in the past year did you ask me what I was actually doing. You saw me on my laptop and assumed I was wasting time. You heard my late-night calls and assumed they were unimportant. You watched me work 16-hour days and never wondered what I was working on. She moved closer, and David had to fight the urge to shrink back. You created this entire narrative about me in your head, boring Liza with her cheap clothes and her simple life, and you never checked if it was true. Because you didn't care. You just wanted permission to trade up. That's not fair. Fair. Liza's laugh was bitter. You brought your girlfriend to my company event, and you want to talk about fair? You've been stealing from our joint account to buy her gifts, and you want to talk about fair? David's eyes widened. She knew about that too? Oh yes, I know about the bracelet. The earrings. The weekend trip to Milwaukee you told me was a work conference. I know all of it, David. Because unlike you, when I care about someone, I pay attention. She pulled out a folder from her briefcase, thick with documents. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this event immediately. You're going to break things off with Veronica tonight. Tomorrow morning, you're going to walk into your supervisor's office and request a transfer to our Phoenix branch. Phoenix? Liza, I can't just move to. You can, and you will. Because the alternative is that I fire you for conduct unbecoming of a Hartwell employee. And yes, before you ask, I can do that. I own this company now. I own your job, your career trajectory, your professional future. And I will not spend the next year running a company where my cheating husband works in the same building, watching him interact with the colleagues he tried to impress by pretending I didn't exist. David stared at her, really seeing her for the first time in months. Seeing the steel underneath the softness, the power behind the quiet grace. The CEO who'd built a fortune while he'd been too busy being embarrassed by her to notice. I loved you, he said, and his voice broke on the words. Past tense, Liza said coldly. Good. That's appropriate. Because I loved you too, David. Loved you enough to work myself to exhaustion building a life we could both be proud of. Loved you enough to wear cheap clothes so we could save for a future together. Loved you enough to keep giving you chances even when you stopped being the man I married. Oh, I blessed the day Maria, my friend, gave me the advice that I should never show my wealth to any man I love until we have spent over 5 years together and am so sure of the man motives. She opened the door. But I don't love you anymore. Love requires respect, and you lost mine the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for your new corporate friends. So here's what happens now. You leave. You break up with Veronica. You take the Phoenix transfer. And in exactly 1 week, you'll be served with divorce papers. At work. During a staff meeting. So everyone who saw you here tonight with your girlfriend will know exactly what kind of man you are. Liza, please. We're done. The prenup you signed, the one you didn't bother reading because you were so in love, is ironclad. You get nothing from TechVision. The apartment is in my name, bought 6 months ago with my signing bonus. The car is in my name. The furniture, the savings, everything. You'll leave this marriage with exactly what you brought into it. Which is nothing, Liza said. Absolutely nothing. David walked out of that suite on legs that barely held him. The elevator ride down felt like descending into hell. When the doors opened, he was back in the ballroom where executives laughed and networked, completely unaware that his world had just imploded. He found Veronica at the bar, sipping champagne and chatting with a junior executive who looked thrilled to have her attention. How did it go? She asked brightly when she saw David. What did she want? David looked at her. At this woman he'd destroyed his marriage for. This woman who knew nothing about him except that he had ambition and a company badge. We're done. Veronica's smile froze. What? You and me. We're done. I need you to leave. Are you serious? You bring me to this event, introduce me to everyone as your partner, and now you're dumping me? In public. The junior executive had quietly melted away, sensing drama. I'm serious. Please leave. Veronica's face cycled through confusion, hurt, and then rage. Her voice rose, drawing stares. Fine. You're pathetic, you know that? I should have known better than to waste my time on a middle manager with delusions of grandeur. Don't call me. She grabbed her purse and stormed out, her heels clicking angrily across the marble floor. David stood there feeling the weight of eyes on him, knowing that by tomorrow the entire company would know that David Anthony had brought his girlfriend to the CEO's event and gotten dumped immediately after. He walked to the coat check in a daze, retrieved his jacket, and left through the side entrance. Outside, November air hit him like a slap. He pulled out his phone to call an Uber, then realized he had nowhere to go. The apartment was Liza's. She'd bought it 6 months ago. Probably around the time she'd started suspecting his affair. Had she known even then that this was coming? Had she been planning her exit while he'd been planning his nights with Veronica? He booked a hotel room, he couldn't afford with a credit card that was already maxed out from buying Veronica gifts. Gifts she probably still had while he had nothing. The Uber driver made small talk about the weather. David stared out the window and said nothing. 6 months later, David sat in his studio apartment in Phoenix, staring at his laptop screen. The tech news site showed a photo of Liza at some industry conference, standing next to other billionaire CEOs, looking confident and powerful and completely at ease in a world he'd never reach. TechVision CEO Liza Anthony announces new $500 million venture capital fund to support Latina entrepreneurs in tech, the headline read. David scrolled through the article. There were quotes from Liza about giving opportunities to people who'd been underestimated, about proving that success wasn't about pedigree or connections, but about vision and relentless work, about creating pathways for women who looked like her, who'd been told they didn't belong, who'd built something anyway. There was no mention of a husband. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, exactly as Liza had promised. David had been served at a department meeting. His supervisor had witnessed it. By the end of the day, everyone in the Phoenix office knew. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor. Need you to redo the Johnson proposal. Client wasn't impressed. Have it on my desk by Monday. It was Friday at 6 p.m. He'd be working all weekend. Again, David looked around his studio apartment. 400 square feet of beige walls and scratched laminate flooring. The Murphy bed that didn't close properly. The kitchenette where he made ramen because he couldn't afford to eat out. The single window that looked out onto a parking lot and a dumpster. This was what he'd been so afraid of. This was the life he'd thought Liza was dragging him toward. Except Liza had never been headed here. She'd been building upward while he'd been looking down on her. David thought about Veronica sometimes. She'd blocked him on social media within a week, but he'd seen through a colleague's account that she was dating someone new, a senior partner at her law firm. Someone with a better title, a better salary, better prospects. He'd been a stepping stone for her, a means to an end, and he'd sacrificed everything for someone who'd never actually wanted him, just what he could offer. He closed the laptop and picked up his phone, scrolling to his photos. He still had pictures from his wedding. Liza in her simple dress that had cost less than Veronica's shoes, both of them young and happy and in love. Both of them believing they were building a future together. He'd deleted Veronica's photos months ago, but he'd kept Liza's. Not because he had any illusion she'd take him back. She wouldn't. She'd made that brutally clear through her lawyer's very professional, very final communications. The divorce had been clean, efficient, and completely one-sided. He'd walked away with his clothes, his laptop, and his shame. But he kept the photos because he needed to remember. Needed to look at that young man in the wedding pictures and understand exactly where he'd gone wrong. Needed to see the moment when he'd had everything and hadn't known it. Liza had loved him when he had nothing, had supported his dreams while building her own, had been patient with his ambitions, his insecurities, his need to prove himself. And he'd repaid her by being ashamed of her, by deciding she wasn't enough, by choosing someone who looked impressive over someone who was actually extraordinary. The lesson was expensive, the kind you pay for in sleepless nights and regrets that taste like ash. The kind that follows you to a new city, a smaller apartment, a smaller life. Some mistakes you can fix, some you can learn from and move forward, and some you carry forever, a weight that never gets lighter, only more familiar. David Anthony was learning which kind of mistake he'd made. Have you ever dismissed someone because they didn't fit your idea of success? Have you ever realized too late that you had everything you needed? Share your thoughts in the comments.